here to talk about that startling admission. My former colleague in the House of Representatives, the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Pete Hoekstra of Michigan, and James Woolsey, former director of Central Intelligence and currently chairman of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Gentlemen, we thank you both for joining us. James, especially by phone, all the way out in L.A., where it's mighty early this morning. James, let me get your take on this first. The admission of, for lack of a better term, hacking in to the Senate Intelligence Committee. Your take on this entire episode.
It's a very serious matter, and I think I've been following what Senator Feinstein and Saxby Chambliss, ranking Republican on the Senate committee, have been saying, and I think they've taken a firm and a very defensible position. This sort of thing happens in due diligence investigations in the non-government world, where somebody will be investigating a company, and then the hunter becomes the hunted, as the people who are being looked at figure out some way to get into the software of the people who are looking to investigate them. So it's not as if this never happens, but to have it happen with a congressional committee having their sensitive questions and investigations being looked into by a U.S. government agency, I don't recall a similar case like this, and it is definitely troubling.
When you were director of Central Intelligence, James, what actions did you take to prevent this type of thing from happening?
Well, it never came up because I don't think anybody in our team would have remotely thought of trying to spy on the Senate Intelligence Committee. It just was one of those things that never came on the horizon. We had some rocky relationships with the committee. The committee wanted me to fire people as a result of Ames. We caught Aldrich Ames, the traitor, and we couldn't fire anybody because the four people who had messed up were already retired. So I had lots of back and forth with my Senate committee because they wanted me to fire somebody, and I kept explaining that you can't fire retired people. So it wasn't that we didn't have controversies. We did. But something like this, I think, would not have happened.
Pete, James has given us the view from Langley, at least in an earlier era. You have a view from the Hill, from chairing the House Intelligence Committee. We talked about this before, but now that it's been confirmed, Pete Hoekstra, your reaction to the news?
Well, I think the first thing we need James Woolsey back as director of the CIA, where you create a culture that says we're not going to do this. This is just totally off of the radar screen. The CIA cannot be hacking into Congress. It cannot be doing anything domestically. It is a foreign intelligence gathering organization. This is really, it's frightening. It should be explosive news that the director of the CIA has formally admitted and apologized to the Senate for hacking into their computers. It is absolutely outrageous.
Well, it prompts this question. Is it time for John Brennan to go? First to you, Pete Hoekstra.
Well, this is going to be a decision that's going to be made by Saxby Chambliss, Senator Feinstein, and their counterparts on the House side. Do they trust, John Brennan to lead that organization with integrity and those types of things? Remember, he came out in March when this first was starting to percolate and vehemently denied and directly went after Senator Feinstein and said the CIA would never do anything like this. And here we have him coming back yesterday. The bottom line is the director of the CIA needs to have the confidence and the trust of his counterparts on the Hill. If he's lost that trust, then it's time to go.
Pete, you mentioned the name of our former colleague in the House, now retiring Senator Saxby Chambliss, who obviously in his role on the Intelligence Committee has been working closely with the agencies on a need-to-know basis, obviously, and he was startled to learn this. Saxby's reaction, and I quote, this is a serious situation and there are serious violations, calling for CIA employees to be dealt with very harshly. Now, on the other side of the aisle, Mark Udall, who is in a tough re-election race and kind of became the, it's a legitimate concern, but the show horse in this. They put him up to talk about this, and now he's saying, and I quote, these offenses, along with others' errors in judgment by some at the CIA, demonstrate a tremendous failure of leadership, and there must be consequences. So, James Woolsey, to you, the consequences. You said the Senate committee wanted people fired back when you were Director of Central Intelligence. Does the firing start at the top with Brennan? What should happen?
Well, I'm not going to add to John's problems because I've been where he is. As I said, they wanted me to be fired because I hadn't fired anybody who was retired, and since it's impossible to fire somebody who's retired, I was perplexed by this. But it's very serious, and John will make his own decisions about what to do. And it's ultimately what this is going to point toward is when all these reports get released, is whether the waterboarding that was done back on Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and two other prisoners shortly after 9/11, whether that was justified or not because it stopped other attacks. And that will be the huge issue. And the people who are on one side or the other of the waterboarding issue, I think will find that they are going to be spending an awful lot of time with people in the Congress on both sides of that, arguing which way things ought to go, and we'll move beyond the very important issue that is here now about agency employees spying on a congressional committee, and will be in the area of, was it justified to waterboard Khalid Sheikh Mohammed? Did it really stop further attacks?
Only about 3 minutes left in our conversation. Let me go to a couple of stories interrelated. Talk today reports of an intelligence failure, or at least an underestimation by Israeli intelligence in terms of the size and scope of the Hamas tunnels as that conflict continues. Let's talk first about that. Is it an intelligence failure? Because normally we think of Israeli intelligence as being totally on the ball. Pete Hoekstra, first to you.
No, I don't think it's an intelligence failure. You remember, people expect that intelligence is going to give you all the information and perfect vision, 20/20 vision. That's not the nature of intelligence. I do think that as the events have unfolded in Gaza over the last couple of weeks, it is clear that the Israelis underestimated the numbers and the sophistication of the tunnel network that was being built between Gaza and Israel. And that's why it's taking them longer to destroy those tunnels. Why this mission is taking longer, and why they've called up 16,000 additional reservists. They underestimated, but I wouldn't go as far as calling it an intelligence failure. They do the best they can. They're not always going to see perfectly.
Fair enough. James Woolsey, you join us this morning from Los Angeles. They're in Southern California. Continuing with the theme of tunnels, on down the I-5 to the border, Tijuana, there's a border fence, but there are a lot of tunnels there. With the money the drug cartels have, with all the things that could transpire, do you believe there's a real concern that we're probably underestimating the tunnels below our southern border across the breadth of that border, not just Tijuana?
We may well be underestimating the scope of those, and I think particularly we are underestimating now the types of things that those who are smuggled across or who get across the border may be planning to do. We could have very serious terrorist attacks taking place in the United States as a result of people getting in illegally, and I think another 9/11 terrible terrorist events are unfortunately not off the screen at all. They get more and more on the screen every day, and in part it's because of the comparative ease of getting into the United States illegally across that border.
A sobering warning, James Woolsey. We thank you for your time. Pete Hoekstra, as always, your intelligence analysis welcomed as well. Gentlemen, thanks so much. So you heard former DCI Chair Woolsey say national security is tied to border security. There's a real threat there.